Hey everyone, it's Miss Maples. I wanted to record this video quickly for you because I couldn't find an online version of this being read. So I wanted you to have access to a reading of it. And I'm also going to explain some of the references and some of the more difficult diction in it. So hopefully it will help you through this piece. So this is Take the Tortillas Out of Your Poetry, and it's an essay written by Rodolfo Anaya. Rodolfo Anaya is a very famous Chicano author. Chicano means that it's a person who was born in the U.S. but is of Mexican descent. So he wrote this essay to describe an idea. So this is not a story. It's not going to have a plot or characters. He's going to discuss a concept with you. Okay, here we go. Paragraph 1. In a recent lecture, Is Nothing Sacred, Salman Rushdie, one of the most censored authors of our time, talked about the importance of books. He grew up in a household in India where books were as sacred as bread. If anyone in the household dropped a piece of bread or a book, the person not only picked it up, but also kissed the object by way of apologizing for clumsy disrespect. He goes on to say that he had kissed many books before he had kissed a girl. Bread and books were for his household, and for many like his, food for the body and the soul. This image of the kissing of the book one had accidentally dropped made an impression on me. It speaks to the love and respect many people have for them. So Rodolfo Anaya is kind of setting up his essay by starting off referencing another famous author named Salman Rushdie. Now, Salman Rushdie he's famous for many writings, but he wrote a book called The Satanic Verses, where he was critical of the Muslim religion of Islam, and there were people trying to kill him over this book. So he really knows like the high stakes of writing, and also Salman Rushdie learned the power of a book, right? That if you offend someone, it can actually really mean danger. So Rodolfo Anaya begins his essay by referencing how important books can be for some people, almost like they're sacred. Okay. Now he's going to give some background on himself. Paragraph 3. I grew up in a small town in New Mexico, and we had very few books in our household. The first one I remember reading was my catechism book. Some of you might know what that is, but it's a book that sums up the beliefs of Catholics. So if you were a Catholic, you might have gone to catechism class. So he's saying that growing up in his small town in New Mexico, he didn't have access to lots of books, but he did read the catechism. Before I went to school to learn English, my mother taught me catechism in Spanish. I remember the questions and answers I had to learn, and I remember the well-thumbed, well-frayed book that was sacred to me. So he keeps using this word sacred. Sacred is usually what we talk about with religion, but he's saying books beyond religion were sacred to him. Words were sacred. Same with Salman Rushdie. Paragraph 4. Growing up with few books in the house created in me a desire and a need for them. When I started school, I remember visiting the one-room library of our town and standing in front of the dusty shelves. In reality, there were only a few shelves and not over 1,000 books, but I wanted to read them all. There was food for my soul in the books, that much I realized. So he's going back to this idea of books are food for the soul, and he wanted to read everything he could get his hands on. Paragraph 5. As a child, I listened to the stories of the people, the cuentos the old ones told. And I remember I had a student explain this one to me. They're like little stories or myths, something passed down. I hope I got that right. But he also listened to stories of the people around him, especially his elders. Those stories were my first contact with the magic of storytelling. These stories fed my imagination, and later, when I wrote books, I found the same sense of magic and mystery in writing. He really makes it sound beautiful, right? The mystery and the magic of storytelling. Paragraph 6. In Bless Me Ultima, my first novel, Antonio, my main character, who has just started school, sees in books the power of the written word. He calls books the magic of words. For me, reading has always been a path toward liberation and fulfillment. To learn to read is to start down the road of liberation. So he's claiming that reading is fulfilling, but it's also freedom. That reading allows you freedom, the road to freedom. It is a road that should be accessible to everyone. No one has the right to keep you from reading, and yet that is what is happening in many areas in the country today. There are those who think they know best what we should read. These censors are at work in all areas of our daily lives. So banned books, right? Pretty much any amazing book that's in school today has at one time been banned because books can be offensive. They offend someone. Someone doesn't like the idea. So Rodolfo Anaya is setting up very clearly his stance on this. He says, no one has the right to decide what you will read. We should have that right ourselves. And yet, there are censors, people who keep books out of libraries, keep books out of schools, keep ideas away from people. And he's bringing that up, that this is a problem, right? Paragraph 8. Censorship has affected me directly, and I have formed some ideas on this insidious activity. But first, I want to give an example of censorship which recently affected a friend of mine. My friend is a Chicano poet and scholar, one of the finest I know. For some time, I have been encouraging Chicano writers to apply for literary fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts. So a fellowship is when people pay for someone to follow their academic pursuit. So if you really show promise in a certain area, sometimes you can get a scholarship to pay for you to continue your studies. So it's a really cool thing. But you have to apply for it, and they're hard to get. And so Rodolfo Anaya was trying to get his friend to apply for these fellowships in literature. A number of poets who use Spanish and English in their poetry applied, but did not receive fellowships. They were so discouraged they did not reapply. This happened to my friend. He is an excellent poet, mature, intelligent, and he had an impressive academic background. He knew that when you apply for a fellowship, you take chances. So he did not give up after being turned down twice. He also knew, we all knew, that many of the panels that judged the manuscripts did not have readers who could read Spanish or bilingual manuscripts. In other words, the judges could not read the poetic language that expresses our reality. My friend rightfully deduced that his poetry was not receiving a fair reading. So Rodolfo Anaya is kind of bringing up a different way that censorship can happen. If the people who are deciding who gets money for scholarships only speak English, and your best poetry is bilingual because you've grown up in a world of Spanish and English, then they're not going to be able to judge your poetry most fairly, okay? And they're probably going to go for the English stuff more than the bilingual stuff. This is problematic, right? Because that means it's shutting out a lot of voices. Think about America full of bilingual people, but if the people who are judging who gets money to further their literary career are only reading things in English, that is a problem. So this is what the friend decided. You know, he told me, if they can't read my bilingual poetry, next time I apply, I'm sending them only poems I read in English. My best poetry is bilingual. It reflects our reality. It's the way we speak, the way we are. But if I stand a better chance at getting a fellowship in English, I'll send that. But the poems I write in English are not my best work. It's just not me. So the friend thinks he has a better chance of getting a fellowship if he only submits his English poetry. But that means he's censoring himself. He says, that is not my best poetry. My best poetry is bilingual and includes Spanish. So we can see how his self-censorship means that other people aren't seeing his best ideas and his best work. I was dismayed by my friend's conclusion. How he coped with the problem has tremendous cultural implications. It has implications that we may call self-imposed censorship. My friend was censoring his creativity in order to fit the imposed criteria. He sent in his poorer work because that was the work the panelists could read and therefore consider for reward. So the friend is self-censoring, not letting himself be his true self to try to fit the mainstream expectation. We see that all the time. You all do it too. I do it. Sometimes we aren't our true selves in order to fit mainstream societal expectations. And Rodolfo Anaya is saying this is a problem. When we self-censor and we aren't ourselves, then that is going to affect culture, right? We're not going to know Chicano literature the way that we should if people are self-censoring. Paragraph 11. My friend had concluded that if he took his language and culture out of his poetry, he stood a better chance of receiving the fellowship. He took out his native language, the poetic patois of our reality, the rich mixture of Spanish, English, Pachuco, and street talk that we know so well. In other words, he took the tortillas out of his poetry, which is to say he took the soul out of his poetry. He still has not received a fellowship, and many of those other poets and writers I have encouraged to apply for the fellowships have quit trying. The national norm simply does not want to bother reading us. That's sad and a powerful thing we need to consider. If the only people deciding what is important are rich white men, which I'm guessing most people on this panel probably were, then we're not getting a true view of America. We're not hearing multicultural voices. We're not hearing voices from women. We're not hearing what America really is, right? And this is a problem in literature. As an English major, I studied mostly dead white guys, and I'd have like a multicultural literature class, like it was something separate. Whereas I should have just been studying English literature, right? Things written in English, but also things that included bilingual pieces, which I did have classes that did that, but I don't think enough. And this is the same point that Rodolfo Anaya is trying to make. Paragraph 12. I do not believe we should have to leave out the crucial elements of our language and culture to contribute to American literature. But unfortunately, this is a conclusion I am forced to reach. I have been writing for a quarter century and have been a published author for 18 years. As a writer, I was part of the Chicano movement, which created a new literature in this country. We struggled to change the way the world looks at Mexican Americans by reflecting our reality in literature. And many eagerly sought out works, but the iron curtain of censorship was still there. So he's saying he has worked to try to have America better understand Mexican Americans, and Chicano literature and art is a huge piece of that. If we don't see the art and literature of people, we don't see their humanity. We don't understand their story. And so he's pointing out that there is still all of this censorship that's happening because people want to fit in. They want to get the scholarship or the fellowship. They want to get published. So they change their writing, take the soul out of it. They take the tortillas out of their poetry. They take their street talk and bilingualism and their soul out of their poetry so that when rich white guys sitting in their ivory tower read it, they like it. Okay. So now you're going to go through title, author, genre, take the tortillas out of your poetry, an essay by Rodolfo Anaya. This is nonfiction, right? This is not a story. It's not a fictional made up thing. And it's an informational text. It is not a narrative. So what you're going to do is write a sentence to summarize paragraphs 1, 2, then 3 through 5, then 6 and 7. So do all of this. That'll give you, when you put it all together, you've got a paragraph that is objectively summarizing this piece. And you're going to be writing a formal objective summary using this outline later. I hope that was helpful to you. And I'll see you later. Bye.